Hi everyone, in this tutorial we're going to be learning about a few of the things you have got to know when working with the standard form of a line equation. A line equation written in its standard form has to look like what we have here, ax plus by equals to c, where a, b, and c are all integers, or whole numbers, and a, that is the number multiplying the x, is a positive integer. And we have an actual example here. We have the line whose equation is 4x plus 2y equals to 10. So to get us started, let's see how to use the standard form of the line equation to draw the line. So I'll just say how to draw. Now for that, I'll quickly draw an XY grid on the right-hand side, something looking like this. There we go. X and Y. And here's the idea. The advantage of writing a line equation in its standard form in order to draw it is that it quickly allows us to find both the x and the y-intercepts of the line. To find the y-intercept, so I'll just write y-int, we're going to let x equal to 0 in our line equation. So copying this line equation but letting x equal to 0, that would be 4 times 0 plus 2y equals to 10, which leads to 2y equals to 10, which leads to y equals to 10 over 2, which is 5. So when x equals to 0, y is equal to 5. And the point with coordinates 0, 5 is the y-intercept of the line. And we can go ahead and add that to our grid, so I'll say it's right here. That's the point at which the line crosses the y-axis. In a similar way, we find the x-intercept, so I'll just write x int. And for that, we're going to let y equal to 0. So copying the line equation we have here, but replacing y by 0, leads to 4x plus 2 times 0 equals to 10. That becomes 4x equals to 10, and therefore x is equal to 10 over 4, or simply x equals to 2.5. This tells us that when y is equal to 0, x is equal to 2.5. And this point, whose coordinates are 2.5, 0, is the x-intercept of the line. And so I could go ahead and add that to our grid here. I could say that 2.5 is roughly there. And so this is the point at which the line crosses the x-axis. Now that we have the two intercepts, we can draw the line passing straight through them. So that would look something like this. And we're done. We've just drawn the line 4x plus 2y equals to 10. So in summary, as soon as we're given a line equation in its standard form, to draw it, we do two things. And I could actually summarize that in a little table like I'm doing in the upper right-hand corner here. I'd have my x and my y. The first thing I do is let x equal to 0, and using the line equation, we calculate what y would have to be. And in this case, we found that it had to be 5. Next, we let y equal to 0, and using the line equation, we figured out what x would have to be, which in this case was 2.5. Once we have those 2 points, the x and y-intercepts, we draw the line. Alright, now that we know how to draw the line, another important thing you have to know is how to find the gradient or the slope of the line. So I'll just say find gradient, and in parentheses slope. To find the gradient of a line written in standard form, there's a nice little trick. Without even thinking, we can go ahead and state that the gradient m is equal to the opposite, so negative, the x coefficient, so in this case 4, divided by the y coefficient, so in this case 2. In other words, I can state that m is equal to negative 4 over 2. And in this case, that leads us to m, the gradient, is equal to negative 2. Done. That's how to find the gradient of a line when it's written in standard form. And to convince you that the method I just used will always work, let me quickly derive the result. Starting from the general standard form of the line equation, so that's ax plus by equals to c, I'm going to go ahead and rearrange this to rewrite this line equation in the slope-intercept form. And when I say slope-intercept form of the line equation, I'm referring to what we see in the lower right-hand corner here. So let's go ahead. First of all, I'll get rid of this ax on the left-hand side. And in doing so, that becomes by equals to negative ax plus c. Next, since the y is being multiplied by b on the left-hand side, I'm going to divide every single term by b. And that leads us to y is equal to negative a over b times x plus c over b. And now, comparing what we have here to the slope-intercept form, we can see that m, the gradient or slope, is negative a over b. And that will always be true. So as soon as we have the standard form ax plus by equals to c, we can state without even thinking that the gradient or the slope m is equal to negative a over b. The next important thing we need to learn about is how to obtain the slope-intercept form starting from the standard form of the line equation. So I'll just write slope-intercept form. Now, just as I said a minute ago, when we say the slope-intercept form, we're referring to the line equation written as y equals to m times x plus c, where the m that's multiplying the x is known as the gradient or slope, and the c that's added at the end here is the y-intercept of the line. Now, to get 4x plus 2y equals to 10 in the slope-intercept form, it really depends on the work that's already been done. Here's what I mean. If in a quiz or a test we've already been asked to draw the line as well as state its gradient, then we already have everything we need to write it in its slope-intercept form. Indeed, we know that the gradient m is negative 2, and we know that the y-intercept c is equal to 5. So without much thinking, we could go right ahead and state that y is equal to negative 2x plus 5. And I could go ahead and box that result. On the other hand, if we were given the line equation 4x plus 2y equals to 10, and we hadn't already been asked to draw it nor find its gradient, then to write it in slope-intercept form, we would rearrange this equation to make y the subject. And here's what that would look like. Starting from 4x plus 2y equals to 10, to make y the subject, I start by subtracting this 4x from both sides of the equation. So that would be 2y equals to 10 minus 4x, or negative 4x plus 10. Next, since y is being multiplied by 2 on the left-hand side, to get rid of the 2, we need to divide every single term that we see by 2. And in doing so, the line equation becomes y is equal to negative 4x divided by 2, which is negative 2x, plus 10 divided by 2, which is 5. Done. We've now rewritten the line in its slope-intercept form. And we move on to the last thing we learn about here, and that is how to write a line equation in its standard form when we're given its slope-intercept form. Here's what I mean. Let's say we're given y equals to 2x minus 6, and we're asked to rewrite this line equation in its standard form. Well, the trick for doing that is to rearrange this line equation in such a way that both the x and the y are on the same side of the equation. Furthermore, we need to make sure that each of the numbers a, b, and c are integers. Finally, we also make sure that the x coefficient a is positive. So let's go ahead. Looking at the line equation we have here, I'll gather both the x and the y terms on the right-hand side of the equation. Anything without an x or y will go on the left-hand side. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this 6, which is being subtracted from the right-hand side. And to do that, I add 6 to both sides. So that becomes y plus 6 equals to 2x. Now that that's done, I get rid of the y, which is on the left-hand side, and for that, I subtract y from both sides of the equation, which leads to 6 equals to 2x minus y. And rewriting this in the opposite order leads to the answer 2x minus y equals to 6. And we're done. We've just rewritten this line equation in its standard form. And for the sake of it, let's go ahead and draw this line on our xy grid here. So remember, to do that, I can do a quick table of values. I'll do that at the top here. So we have our x and our y. And the first thing I do is let x equal to 0 and calculate y. So if I do that at the bottom here, I'll say when x equals to 0, our line equation becomes 2 times 0 minus y equals to 6, which leads to negative y equals to 6, which means y is equal to negative 6, which we can write in our table of values when x equals to 0, y equals to negative 6. Next, I let y equal to 0, and I calculate x, so if I just write that, when y equals to 0, the line equation becomes 2x minus 0 equals to 6. That's 2x equals to 6, which leads to x equals to 3. And again, I add that to my table of values here. There. Using these points, we can quickly draw the line. We have the y-intercept with coordinates 0, negative 6, which I'll say is right here, so I just write negative 6 there. And we have the x-intercept with coordinates 3, 0. So I'll go ahead and say that's somewhere right here. Finally, we draw the line. And there we have it. We now know how to draw a line when it's given to us in standard form. We also saw how to find the gradient of the line, or the slope of the line, for which we derived this formula here. We've also seen how to get from the standard form of a line equation to the slope-intercept form. And finally, we saw how to get from the slope-intercept form to the standard form of a line. And that's it for this tutorial.